There is a moment in 1986 that changed how the Soviet Union thought about medicine forever. The Chernobyl reactor has just exploded. Thousands of workers are being sent into the radioactive zone to contain the disaster. These men, called liquidators, faced radiation doses that would destroy their DNA, collapse their immune systems, and kill their gut lining within weeks. The Soviet medical establishment reached for something that was not a pharmaceutical. It was not synthesized in a laboratory. It did not come from a patent. It came from a shrub that grew wild across the Siberian steppe, the Himalayas, and the valleys of Central Asia. Workers received sea buckthorn oil to coat their gastrointestinal tracts. They applied it to radiation burns. Some drank the juice. The plant had been studied intensively for decades precisely because Soviet scientists knew that in a nuclear age, they might one day need it. At the same moment, across the ocean, the United States Department of Agriculture had quietly issued its assessment of the same plant. The conclusion? A worthless shrub with no commercial potential. This is the story of Hippophae rhamnoides, sea buckthorn, the berry that the Soviet Union weaponized for human survival and that America was taught to ignore. Not because the science failed, because the science was never done. And the reason it was never done reveals everything about who decides what becomes medicine and what becomes a weed. The story begins not in a laboratory, but in the Himalayan foothills, roughly 12,000 years ago. Sea buckthorn is one of the oldest flowering plants on Earth. Fossilized pollen traced to the genus has been found in geological strata dating back millions of years. It survived ice ages, tectonic shifts, and mass extinction events that killed species far more specialized than itself. The reason is simple. Sea buckthorn does not require civilization to survive. It requires almost nothing. The plant is a thorned shrub growing up to 30 feet tall. In late summer, the branches disappear entirely beneath clusters of vivid orange berries so dense they look like the branch itself has turned orange. Those berries cling so tightly to thorned branches that harvesting by hand is brutally slow. The Soviets and Chinese eventually developed specialized freezing and vibration equipment to harvest at scale. Equipment the West never bothered to build. It fixes its own nitrogen, enriching rather than depleting the soil around it. It survives -40 degrees Fahrenheit and 105 degrees Fahrenheit. It grows in salt flats, sand dunes, and at Tibetan elevations above 12,000 feet, where it is frequently the only woody plant standing. A single established bush produces 20 to 30 pounds of berries per year for 30 years or more, without replanting, without fertilization, without irrigation in most climates. One planting, 3 decades of reliable harvest. What is inside those berries, however, is where this story becomes genuinely difficult to believe. In the 1940s and the 1950s, Soviet scientists began systematically analyzing sea buckthorn with a specific mandate: find foods and medicines that did not depend on foreign supply chains, foods that soldiers, pilots, and cosmonauts could use without elaborate logistics. Sea buckthorn kept returning results the scientists initially questioned. The vitamin C content was the first shock. Sea buckthorn berries contain between 400 and 900 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams of fruit. Oranges contain roughly 50 milligrams. That is 8 to 18 times the vitamin C of the fruit the entire Western world relies on, in a plant that grows where orange trees would freeze to death overnight. The beta-carotene content exceeds that of carrots, which is visually obvious from the intense orange color. But researchers found not just beta-carotene, lycopene, zeaxanthin, and lutein appeared together in concentrations rarely seen in a single food source. The vitamin E content rivals the richest known sources. Then there are the fatty acids. Almost every food provides one or two omega types. Sea buckthorn provides all four: omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, and the extraordinarily rare omega-7. Omega-7, palmitoleic acid, is found in meaningful concentrations in almost no plant food on Earth. It lines and regenerates mucous membranes, the tissue protecting your stomach, intestinal walls, and lungs. Soviet research found that sea buckthorn oil applied to burned or radiation-damaged tissue accelerated healing beyond standard medical treatments of the time. When researchers compiled the full bioactive compound profile, the number was 190. 190 distinct active compounds, flavonoids, phenolic acids, terpenes, sterols, organic acids, and a full vitamin spectrum. No pharmaceutical drug contains 190 active compounds. No vitamin pill replicates the profile. The berry is a concentration of biological tools that evolved over millions of years in one of Earth's harshest environments, packed into something the size of a pea. By the 1950s, Soviet institutions had made sea buckthorn a formal research priority. Over 200 published studies existed by the 1980s, covering radiation protection, cardiovascular disease, gastric ulcer treatment, and athletic recovery. The research was peer-reviewed and rigorous, some of it later confirmed by Western scientists who found it sitting in archives long after the Soviet collapse. The cardiovascular research matters most here because heart disease was becoming a crisis inside Soviet borders. Soviet men were dying of heart attacks at alarming rates. Rather than pursuing pharmaceutical solutions, researchers turned to botanical interventions. Sea buckthorn oil, with its multi-omega complex, tocopherols, and plant sterols, created what researchers described as a comprehensive cardiovascular intervention in a single food source. Plant sterols reduce circulating LDL cholesterol. Omega-7 improves insulin sensitivity. The flavonoids quercetin and isorhamnetin act as anti-inflammatory agents in arterial walls. Soviet clinical studies reported reductions of 25 to 30% in cardiac events among patients receiving standardized sea buckthorn preparations, controlled trials, hundreds of patients, consistent results. By the 1970s, sea buckthorn oil had been incorporated into the Soviet Pharmacopoeia, the official national list of approved medicines. A whole plant extract, listed alongside synthesized drugs. It became standard issue for military personnel and cosmonauts, a recognized protection compound built into operational protocols rather than an optional supplement. And when Chernobyl exploded, and the state needed to send human beings into a radiation environment that had no pharmaceutical answer, sea buckthorn was already there, already studied, already part of the infrastructure. The system had prepared for exactly this moment. While scientists published and physicians prescribed, agricultural planners planted at industrial scale. Sea buckthorn plantations spread across Russia, Kazakhstan, and Central Asia. The total planted area reached approximately 150,000 acres at peak cultivation, roughly equivalent to all commercial blueberry cultivation in the United States today, dedicated to a single berry most Americans had never heard of. The plantations served multiple purposes simultaneously. Food production supplied berries for athlete and military nutrition programs. Pharmaceutical production supplied seeds and pulp for burn treatment, ulcer therapy, and cardiovascular medicine. And because sea buckthorn enriches rather than depletes surrounding soil, it became a tool for deliberate land reclamation. 150,000 acres of erosion reversal across some of the most degraded terrain in Central Asia, restoring productivity to land that industrial farming had written off. One crop, three functions, no inputs. China watched this program and then exceeded it. With its own centuries-long tradition of sea buckthorn use in Tibetan and Mongolian medicine, China adopted the Soviet cultivation model at a scale the Soviets never attempted. Today, China farms an estimated 2.5 million acres, producing juice, oil, cosmetics, tea, and pharmaceutical preparations exported across Europe and Russia. European researchers followed with rigorous clinical trials on dry eye treatment and cardiovascular outcomes through the 1990s and 2000s. Meanwhile, in the United States, the official assessment had done its quiet work. No plantations, no trials, no pharmacopoeia entry, just silence. Why did the United States not study sea buckthorn? The answer is direct. Sea buckthorn presented no commercial opportunity for the industries that fund American agricultural and pharmaceutical research. It cannot be patented. Sea buckthorn has reproduced freely for thousands of years. It is public domain in the most absolute sense. Any farmer can grow it. Any processor can extract its oil. It cannot be owned. And the infrastructure hurdles from harvesting to processing offered no return on investment. Without that ownership, without a patent, any competitor can move into the same unprotected market the moment you have built it. Most critically, the American pharmaceutical industry had no incentive to study a botanical medicine that could not be made proprietary. When Soviet researchers published cardiovascular findings, the American response was not to replicate those trials. It was to search for a single isolatable molecule, synthesize it, modify it, patent it, sell it. That chemical complexity, the reason the berry works, is precisely what makes it commercially useless to an industry built on owning molecules. A whole ecosystem of compounds working in concert cannot be patented. A derivative of one compound can be. So that is where the money went. This is not conspiracy. It is the logical output of a system in which research follows profit. The Soviet Union had a state mandate to serve public health regardless of commercial viability. American research required proprietary returns. The result? Over 200 Soviet research papers by 1988, 0 American clinical trials in the same period. When American researchers finally began studying sea buckthorn seriously in the late 1990s, they were not leading the science. They were catching up to work that had been sitting in archives for decades, ignored not because it was wrong, but because nobody could charge admission to it. The scientific question stands independent of the politics. What does the evidence actually show? The cardiovascular research is the most substantial. A 2011 study found that daily sea buckthorn consumption significantly reduced platelet aggregation, the blood cell clumping that triggers heart attacks. A 2018 review of multiple human clinical trials found consistent reductions in LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and oxidative stress markers in cardiovascular patients. Peer-reviewed, internationally edited journals, confirming what Soviet researchers documented 30 years earlier without Western acknowledgement. The dry eye research is the most methodologically rigorous, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial demonstrating that daily sea buckthorn oil significantly reduced dry eye symptoms by improving tear film osmolarity, the key clinical marker. The mechanism is omega-7 and its documented effect on mucous membrane regeneration. The anti-inflammatory profile may be the most broadly significant. Chronic inflammation now underlies our understanding of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative disease, and several cancers. Sea buckthorn's combination of fatty acids, quercetin, isorhamnetin, And ursolic acid creates a multi-pathway anti-inflammatory effect that no single pharmaceutical replicates without significant side effects. The radiation research remains difficult to fully evaluate. Chernobyl's clinical conditions were chaotic and documentation incomplete. What can be confirmed is that the carotenoids, tocopherols, and flavonoids in sea buckthorn protect cellular DNA from oxidative damage and accelerate tissue repair. The mechanisms are real. The Soviet application of them was not irrational. None of this has made sea buckthorn a recognized treatment in the United States. Without pharmaceutical funding for large-scale trials, there is no approval. Without approval, no prescription. Without prescription, no awareness. The cycle maintains itself. The pattern is older than this story. Amaranth, suppressed not because it failed, but because it fed people without requiring permission. Sunchoke, abandoned because it replanted itself for free and generated no annual seed revenue. Parsley, classified as a weed and poisoned across the Western world, while half the planet eats it as a vegetable. In each case, the barrier was not biology. It was a business model that could not tolerate abundance it did not control. Sea buckthorn is the same story at a geopolitical scale. One system asked what serves the people and built 150,000 acres. Another asked what generates returns and produced silence. China now farms 2.5 million acres. European researchers publish clinical trials. The science accumulates without American participation. The plant does not care. It grows across the northern plains and down to the mid-Atlantic, in the degraded and marginal land that industrial monoculture has left behind. A single planting provides a massive, reliable yield for decades without the fertilizers, pesticides, and annual seed purchases that keep farmers dependent on the same supply chains that ignored this plant. As climate models identify semi-arid zones with declining rainfall and rising temperatures as the first places conventional crops will fail, a plant that thrives from Siberian winters to desert heat, that heals rather than hollows the ground beneath it, is not a curiosity. It is infrastructure we have not built yet. The story closes where it opened. Chernobyl liquidators applying orange oil to their burns. A government bulletin calling the same plant commercially worthless. Both were the logical output of their systems. One system produced a medicine. The other produced silence. Sea buckthorn did not fail American trials. There were no American trials. The barrier was never biology. It was the simple, brutal fact that you cannot charge someone for what grows freely, and that evolutionary resilience, that refusal to require ownership to survive, is precisely what made it valuable for 12,000 years and threatening to the industries of the last 50. The berry is still here. It grows in sand. It grows in salt. It persists through conditions that kill everything planted around it. It carries its nutritional complexity in a small orange fruit that clings to a thorned branch through a Siberian winter and waits, as it has always waited, for someone willing to ask the question the industry never wanted asked. Why wasn't this studied? When the answer is, it couldn't be owned, you have found what was buried. And buried things can be dug up. The story of sea buckthorn is a reminder that the most powerful tools for our survival often don't come from a laboratory. They come from the earth, and they've been waiting there for thousands of years. If this deep dive changed how you look at the weeds in your own backyard, or the systems that decide what becomes medicine, let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts on why we've allowed so much of this knowledge to be buried. If you found value in this investigation, please hit the like button and subscribe. It's the simplest way to help us keep digging up the stories that weren't supposed to be told. And if you're looking for the next piece of the puzzle, click the video on your screen now to explore more lost history. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.